Yeah, it was great. And,
yeah, just some more than others, but you know, you do good stuff. So.
They were over here, and then they ran over.
And then, you know where you go here?
Oh, I'm so
Is
sorry.
it this one? Or this one?
No, it's not that one. It should be. Oh, where are they now? I have no idea. That one.
That one.
That's enough.
Let me just quickly introduce you.
No, it's fine.
And it's perfect. Thank you.
Just the little arrows on the keys.
Oh, so they can move it with the arrows on the key. Oh, which is it? This the sideways arrow.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. It's good to have the Pearl Familia here again. 2 in 1 day. That's fantastic. Before we get started, just a couple of announcements. If you're a student and you did not sign in on the way in, make sure you sign in on the way out. And second, the event is being recorded, and the recording will be uploaded to the Wolf Institute channel. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to someone who's very special to me, because you've been my mentor the entire time I've been at Brooklyn College, Professor Perez y Gonzalez from Priority Latino Studies.
Saludos, welcome. I am so happy to see each and every one of you here. And so the first thing I want to do is just say, right, that this class, this presentation, is sponsored by the class of Puerto Rican and Latinx Studies 3325, Urban Institutions and the Latinx Experience. And it's an independent study course, so it's a small course, and most of us are here, but some of us are missing, so I'm assuming they're going to walk in. If you can all just stand up as a class, say hello to everybody. Okay. And so thank you for coming out and supporting the students during this time. It's a very special time. The research project, a culminating project in the class that they've been working toward, is a research project. And so each has picked their own topic, prepared their own research question, has submitted book work, right? An annotated bibliography and that kind of book research, but then I had them create their own questionnaires. And so the students are at different points in their research, but it's going to culminate, and so these 3 students are at different places also, so they'll present their work and let you know. But they created a questionnaire. They will tell you the questions, and then they have collected, right, that information, and they're going to tell you what they found. And so the first one is Alma Cabrera. And Alma Cabrera is a queer Latinx psychology student who works with children as an applied behavioral analysis technician and is pursuing a career in occupational therapy. She is also completing a minor in PRLS, bringing a liberation perspective to her work. And so I want to welcome up to the podium, right, Alma Cabrera.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I'm really grateful to be a part of this Student Expo. I know my peers and I have worked very hard on this and are excited to share our work today. So, as you saw in the beginning, my research today is focused on Latinx perspectives on authority. My focus is on Latinx perspectives on authority and how those perceptions influence the ways in which the Latinx individuals interact with law enforcement as well as the justice system. So this is my introduction. Latinx communities in the United States have diverse cultural backgrounds, histories, and experiences that shape their perspectives on authority and institutions such as the police and the justice system. Cultural values, immigration experiences, and historical relationships with government institutions can influence how individuals interpret authority figures and whether they feel comfortable interacting. Many groups within Latinx communities have different relationships with law enforcement and the justice system based on experiences in their countries of origin. In some of these countries, institutions may be perceived as corrupt or untrustworthy, while in others, they may be viewed as more respectable. Because of this, many people enter the United States with their own perceptions and expectations of authority with caution or skepticism due to past experiences with discrimination, fear of immigration consequences, or general lack of trust in institutions. Understanding these perceptions is important because they influence whether individuals report crimes, cooperate with law enforcement, or seek legal protection when they need it. This research seeks to explore how members of Latinx communities perceive authority and how these perceptions influence their interactions with the justice system. Most of my research focuses on law enforcement and the judicial system, as I mentioned, as urban institutions affecting Latinx communities, but these perceptions go beyond those systems and are interconnected across many institutions in the United States. Authority shows up in many areas of our life, and these perceptions shape how Latinx communities of all ages engage with it. So this is a little bit about the demographic of the respondents that answered my questionnaire. So the ages range from 19 years old to 39. 40% were male, 30% female, and 30% identified as non-binary. The majority identifying as Puerto Rican or Dominican, which made up 60%. 60% of the respondents work full-time, 30% part-time, and 10% are unemployed. 90% are not students, 90% were born in the US, and I added this chart, which asked, with one of the questions that I asked, which was, have you or any family members had any involvement with the judicial system? And I thought this was very interesting because more than half of the respondents answered yes to this question, which is very, very, very important and telling. So these were the 10 research purpose questions that I asked my respondents. The first one is, Latinx people in my community respect authority figures such as police officers and judges. Members of Latinx communities feel hesitant to interact with law enforcement. Fear of immigration consequences can influence whether someone contacts the police. Cultural values influence how people in my community respond to authority figures. Latinx individuals avoid reporting crimes because they do not trust the justice system. Experiences of discrimination affect how Latinx communities view law enforcement. Latinx people in my community feel comfortable seeking help from the police if they needed it. Media discussions influence how Latinx individuals perceive the justice system. Latinx communities believe that the justice system treats them fairly. And my last question, which was an open-ended question, asked, in your opinion, what factors most influence how Latinx communities interact with law enforcement or the justice system? So these right here are a few charts of that I thought, again, were very interesting and can provide a lot of information. The first one asks, Latinx individuals avoid reporting crimes because they do not trust the justice system. This one was split up quite interesting, with 50% strongly agreeing, 30% somewhat agreeing, and 20% somewhat disagreeing, which is, very interesting. The second one is Latinx communities believe that the justice system treats them fairly, with 40% disagreeing, 20% somewhat disagreeing, and 40% somewhat agreeing. The last one, Latinx people in my community feel comfortable seeking help from the police if they needed it. This one was also split up, and 30% somewhat disagreeing, 30% strongly disagreeing, 30% somewhat disagreeing, and 10% strongly agreeing. And that one is especially interesting. I think that my respondents, there was not a very wide range, but still a range. And I think that depending on the age of the respondents, I think that this could go many ways, especially if maybe they haven't had to encounter certain experiences that have shaped them. I think with age, we have more life experiences and we've seen a lot. So I think that has a lot to do with it. For my open-ended response, I received many, but these three really, really stuck out with me. The first respondent said, the long-standing history of police brutality, racial discrimination, and xenophobia influence how Latinx communities interact with both law enforcement and the criminal justice system. Latinx communities are the victims of both micro and macro discrimination when it comes to the criminal justice system, and this has been and continues to be felt in our communities today. Respondent number 2 said immigration status, excluding Puerto Ricans, second-gen, or naturalized citizens. Socio-political history and region, for example, Latinx based in New York City may hold much different beliefs about police than those in the suburbs I was raised in. Respondent number 3 said white supremacy and the internalization of this. I think the answers to these responses are very present in the research, and when I was looking into my sources, I think that this is a very important and seen among a lot of Latinx individuals. And these are conversations that we, as a society, need to begin having every single day and get more comfortable with it, because this really can make a difference. So some connections and gaps that I saw with my research, as well as the questionnaire findings. So both resources and questionnaires show a strong pattern of mistrust towards law enforcement. This was seen across all of my sources, as well as all of the responses from the respondents. Sources discuss racism, discrimination, and negative police interactions, and the questionnaire supports this with 100% agreement that discrimination affects perception, and 80% agreement that people avoid reporting crimes due to lack of trust. The idea of fear influencing behavior is consistent in both my sources and questionnaire. Fear from past police interaction and systemic racism, as well as 90% strongly agree that fear of immigration consequences influence the behavior that is shown when interacting with law enforcement or the justice system as a whole. Some other connections were hesitation to interact with law enforcement, media influences, and political climate are reflected in both, and both emphasize that past experiences in the US and home countries shape perceptions of authority. And in many research, there are obviously some gaps that exist, and we don't know the answer. We can't quite possibly know the answer to everything, and we aren't perfect. So some of the gaps, and I'm sure there are more, but these are some of the ones that I included, which the questionnaire findings show that 70% believe Latinx communities respect authority, which adds nuance. That is less emphasized in the sources, which makes sense because a lot of my sources included personal encounters and experiences that individuals have had with police in their childhood and adulthood, adolescence, yes, as well as biases within the respondents. These were people in my circle, which tend to align in my beliefs. So that's a discrepancy right there, and as well as the small sample size. I'm sure that if we have more respondents, we're going to see a very wide variety of information. Now what? So this research presents a lot of really hard and uncomfortable feedback and information that we listen to, and it's easy to feel hopeless. Like, what do we do now? Because one person isn't capable of changing the whole entire system. So this is a little bit of what I had to offer. As we move forward into the future, it is crucial for law enforcement, the judicial system, and other agents of our government to deconstruct the harmful biases, rhetoric, and belief systems that they embody that influence the way they treat and interact with Latinx individuals. They must take these factors into consideration. However, big however, in order to do this, they must first see people in Latinx communities as human beings. Because in order to make a change, you have to deem the person worthy and human to actually care about putting things into practice and doing things differently so we can have a better future for everyone. Incorporating trauma-informed approaches as well as greater education on community safety can be steps taken in the future to improve the relationship between Latinx communities and authority, as well as their interactions with these systems. A question that I wanted to leave you guys with today is, how would you imagine community safety without police? Because a lot of what I am talking about here today has to do with law enforcement and the judicial system, but like I mentioned, this is a web. Everything is connected. Whether you're in school, whether you're in an organization, everywhere that you show up, all of these perceptions impact community. And yeah, I just want to see a difference, and I want my community members to feel safe. I want everyone to feel safe. So I think that if we can just try our best to apply these things and do the internal work, I think that we can see a great change. So thank you so much for having me.
So that was Alma Cabrera. So thank you, Alma, for an important topic to take up and for your very human, right, compassionate considerations in terms of this research. So our next presenter,
Let me set that up before I introduce her. Let's see. Yeah. Okay.
so our next presenter is Sierra Smith Vasquez, who is a junior at Brooklyn College pursuing a degree in English literature. Beyond her major, she has developed a deep passion for Puerto Rican and Latinx studies, a field that has profoundly shaped her academic journey. I did not pay her for this. This is her own words. This is not me. When she's not buried in a book or crafting her own poetry, she is usually engaging with the complex narratives that define our history and culture. This year marks her second year studying under Professor Perez y Gonzalez, and she can honestly say that every course she's taking with them has been a highlight of my time at Brooklyn College. She is genuinely happy to be here to share the insights she's gained throughout this academic year. Her recent research and studies have focused heavily on the intersection of Latinx youth and urban education within New York City schools, a topic that is both personal and vital to our community. She looks forward to discussing these findings and contributing to the ongoing conversation about equity and representation in our educational system. So let us welcome Sierra.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sierra. I'm happy to be here as this is my first student expo. So I hope you guys enjoy my presentation and get something out of it. So for my presentation, I'll be talking about fostering leadership among Latinx youth in NYC public schools. My research question is, how can urban public high schools in New York City better foster leadership development among Latinx youth? My goal is to move beyond general leadership programs and to identify specific cultural responsive strategies that empower Latinx students and to take charge of their futures. Just a brief introduction, Latinx kids make up a significant portion of the educational landscape in New York City. About 41% of all students enrolled in public schools. Despite this demographic, many Latinx teenagers often encounter structural obstacles that prevent them from assuming leadership positions in their communities and schools. These obstacles frequently show up as a lack of extracurricular activities that are culturally appropriate, underrepresentation in advanced academic programs, and a mentorship that takes account of their real-world experiences. My goal in this study is to determine how can urban public schools can help Latinx students develop their leadership skills by implementing more effective policies and procedures. I aim to identify practical strategies that educators can use to foster civic engagement and self-confidence. So, who participated? For my questionnaire, I interviewed 10 people. In the demographic, the questions were: what is your age? What is your gender identity? Which best describes your Latinx background? And did you participate in any after-school or community programs during high school? The results came with 10 students, 60% were female, 40% were male. The age range about 18 to 20. The group was primarily Puerto Rican, reflecting on local school demographic, and most of the participants were active in school, but they still felt a lack of specific support for their identity. This information shows a strong contrast between cultural support and general leadership opportunities. Now, my questionnaire, it was 10 questions. The first question was: at my high school, students were encouraged to take on leadership roles through clubs, student government, or special projects. My second question was: at my high school, I felt represented by teachers who shared my cultural background. Number 3 was: there were students at my high school who supported me as mentors and helped me achieve my goals. Number 4 was: my cultural experiences were reflected in the curriculum of my classes. Number 5 was: I had the opportunity to take on leadership positions in terms of club, student government, and class projects. Number 6 was: students at my high school were encouraged to participate in civic engagement, volunteering, or community service. Number 7 was: my high school provided resources specifically aimed at Latinx leadership development. Question 8, I felt that my Latinx background was valued within my school community. Number 9, my high school offered extracurricular activities that reflected Latinx culture. And my open-ended question was: what could your high school have done better to support Latinx students who aspire to become leaders? So, in particular, there was a glaring lack of institutional support for Latinx identity, despite the fact that 90% of students had said that they were encouraged to join in general groups, and 80% said that they had the opportunity to assume leadership roles. 60% of my respondents thought that their cultural history was not recognized enough by the school community, and 90% of my respondents had strongly disagreed or some would disagree that their school offered resources that were intended for Latinx leadership development. The input, which was revealed to be 80% for participants, had felt isolated in their leadership aspirations as a result of lack of mentors who shared their same experience culturally, further highlights the disparity of Latinx identity and cultural background in schools and school community. For the open-ended question, I wrote: the inclusion of Latinx history and viewpoints in the core curriculum, the creation of specialized groups or leadership programs that particularly address the particular difficulties experienced by Latinx students, mentorship that is culturally component were all often mentioned by respondents. So in the end, while the school was effective in cultivating a general culture of involvement, it was unable to offer the cultural scaffolding required to support the particular leadership goals of its Latinx student body. So one of the big takeaways is when, for the curriculum, 80% again had felt that their history and culture were absent from the classroom. 70% disagreed that their school provided resources specifically for Latinx leadership. And the isolation factor is even when students were in leadership roles, 80% still felt isolated because their cultural identity wasn't valued or represented enough in work. For the open-ended feedback, when I asked what schools could have done better, the answers were consistent. Include Latinx history and viewpoints in core classes, create better spaces for Latinx students to navigate their challenges, and provide better mentors who are culturally involved and can relate to the students' backgrounds. For my research alignment, the book research and the results that I got from the respondents were consistent with each other. The views of my participants who believe that their schools were not cultivating their Latinx identity as a leadership asset clearly reflected on the absence of representation and why representation matters in schools. There wasn't really much of a difference between the literature, the book research, and my findings, but it is important to highlight that students believe that they could find leadership through general student government, even in the absence of special Latinx programs. This implies that although schools are providing clubs as a minimum, they're still losing out on a chance to offer focused, culturally aware mentorship that would increasingly empower Latinx youth. This nature of Latinx youth leadership development in NYC schools has been highlighted by my research. Despite their desire to take on leadership roles, students frequently navigate institutions that do not accurately represent their experiences. According to my research, in order to close this gap, schools should place a high priority on employing diverse employees and incorporating Latinx-centered curriculums. I do believe that schools may better educate Latinx children as our future's leaders by creating this more open and represent atmosphere that celebrates their identity. So yes, in reality, my research, it confirms that while schools, they do provide opportunities, they're still missing on a chance to provide specific support. Leadership isn't just a natural trait, it is a skill that grows when a student's identity is treated as an asset and not an afterthought. So as I close out for my presentation, as things to think about our own school experiences, especially in Puerto Rican studies. Number one, for the audience, did you ever feel like your culture was a hidden part of your identity at school? Question two is, how much more confident would you like if your curriculum reflected your own history? And number three, what does inclusive leadership look like to you in practice? And I ask these questions because we're in a world where censorship is being taken place, and there's trying to ban Latinx history, ethnic studies in schools and curriculums, not letting kids, especially kids of color, to know their history and know their identity. So it's happening, and I think this conversation needs to happen in order for a change to happen for Latinx kids and kids of color. So their identities is not hidden, it's celebrated and represented. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, thank you, and thank you for this research and your presentation on it, and very interesting questions to ponder. So, let me take this off. Okay, I'm going to set up for the next one. And whoops, wait a minute, did I do that wrong? Yes, I did. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Kim. So lastly we have, right, and again, this is just a representative, few from the class presenting their research, but I'm really proud of the work that they've done. And so lastly, we have Amira Perez, is a childhood education major with a concentration in Puerto Rican and Latinx studies. She had the opportunity to study abroad in Chile, Professor Carla España, taking a course on immigrant communities, which was just before this presentation. Let me welcome Amira Perez.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon again to the people who've seen me presented previously. Thank you all for coming to the HSS Student Expo. And today I will be presenting my research project on how economic disadvantages affect Latinx students pursuing a higher education. So, in the United States, the education system offers various opportunities for students to pursue a higher education. However, access to these opportunities are not equal for every student, particularly in terms of financial support. This raises the question of whether Latinx students who apply for FAFSA, TAP scholarships and student loans receive sufficient and accessible support. The struggles Latinx students face in pursuing a higher education are often overlooked. So this study focuses on Latinx students' experiences and perspectives on economic disadvantages or struggles they experience and how it affects them pursuing a higher education. And this study was conducted in Brooklyn College. So these are the demographic questions I asked the participants in the study. It's how old are you? What is your gender? What year are you currently in college? So like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or even a graduate? What is your major? What is your student status? Full-time, part-time? Are you currently employed? If yes, are you employed full-time or part-time? Did you apply for financial aid, so like FAFSA, TAP, scholarships, even student loans? If yes, did you receive a sufficient financial aid package? Did you take out student loans, and are you the first in your family to attend college? So these are the main questions the participants answered in the survey, and they were based on a scale from agree to disagree. So the first question is, the process of applying for financial aid is stressful. Economic struggles negatively affect students' ability to pursue a higher education. I have equal access to scholarships, financial aid, opportunities compared to other groups. The cost of tuition at CUNY makes it difficult for students to pursue a higher education. Financial aid resources are clearly explained and accessible to me. Student loans are a valuable long-term investment, and I feel hesitant to ask my parents or family for financial help towards school. Whenever I need financial guidance, I could rely on my school's financial aid department. What financial struggles have you experienced while attending college? That's an open-ended question. And the other open-ended question is, what advice would you give to other students facing financial challenges in college? So these are the survey results. As you could see, the participants come from many different majors. A lot comes from childhood education majors. Some are in psychology and Puerto Rican majors, and some is English literature. So they express their cultural background to be from a Latinx background. And when I asked them their student status, most of them are a full-time college student. So this is the survey results. So for did you apply for financial aid? All of the students that participated in the survey applied for financial aid. And I asked them, did you receive sufficient financial aid package? And it was split between 50-50. So 50 of them agree that they did receive a sufficient financial aid package. And then the other half stated that they did not. So the process of applying for financial aid is stressful. I think it's very stressful, and I would say many students do think it can be stressful. The cost of tuition at CUNY makes it difficult for students to pursue higher education, and a lot of students did agree with that statement. I also agree with that statement. I think CUNY College's tuition is increasing every year, and so therefore it is getting harder to pay. Student loans are a valuable long-term investment, and it's like a mixed people. Some people agree, some people don't agree, but I think a lot of people disagree with the fact that student loans are like a long-term investment. I don't think many students will want to apply for student loans because you do have to pay back student loans. And whenever I need financial guidance, I can rely on my school financial aid department. There's a lot of mixed statements about this one. So what financial aid struggles have you experienced while attending college? So this is some of the participants' responses. So one of them said that I have experienced 2 problems dealing with financial aid. The first problem I had was when the system wanted my parents to verify their account in order to complete their part of the application. That year, it took me 4 months to solve this problem. The second problem dealing with financial aid is getting a non-filing tax transcript from my mom. Even though she's a stay-at-home mom and never had a job, this is still an ongoing problem that I have been yet to solve. Another participant said that paying my tuition on time due to economic struggles. And another one said the financial aid office believes I could afford school while paying rent and covering everyday expenses. However, my hours were cut and I was still unable to receive financial aid. And there were no other feasible options besides taking out a loan. So another question was, what advice would you give to other students facing financial challenges in college? One of them said that to apply as early as possible for scholarships and grants. Additionally, to keep an organized list and schedule of when due dates are and what documents you'll need. Another one stated, look into college fund aid and financial aid before paying the tuition, and check consistently to make sure your education is being paid for and secured in college. Another person said, I would say keep working until you solve your problems, even if you aren't being provided support. And another one advised you have to lie to get sufficient funds. Please do not lie, because you will get caught, okay? So these are the article connections. So one article I read was Latinx community college students experiencing financial aid income verification, so a critical race analysis by Devon Graves. So this article examines the experiences of Latinx college students applying for financial aid. And while financial aid provides support through grants and scholarships, some students are selected for a verification process that delays their aid. And this creates setbacks as students struggle to find required documents and wait for the financial aid office to review their forms. And the inspired questions where financial aid resources are clearly explained and accessible to me. The second one is whenever I need financial aid guidance, I can rely on my school's financial aid department. So this is the FAFSA verification process. So in certain points, some students will get randomly selected to fill out this process. And if you don't fill out this process, your financial aid won't get dispersed. Therefore, you won't be able to register for classes for the next semester. And I was a victim of this verification process, so I thought I needed to take a gap year, and my financial aid wasn't dispersing, so I went to the financial aid department and I asked for their help to fill out this verification form, and I filled it out. However, I still had to pay $3,000 for the tuition, so I used half of my savings to pay for the college tuition, so therefore I could register for classes for the next semester. So another article connection is, without them, I couldn't pay for my education, so here I am, Latinx college graduates' experiences with and perceptions of their student loan debt by Vincent Carles. This study examines Latinx college graduates' experiences with student loan debt, focusing on why they borrow, their lack of financial guidance, and the negative impacts of debt. The findings show that many students feel unprepared for financial decisions and that debt limited their career opportunities. This study highlights how limited financial understanding contributes to long-term economic struggles. So the inspired questions I got was, economic struggles negatively affect students' ability to pursue higher education. The cost of tuition at CUNY makes it difficult for students to pursue higher education, and student loans are a viable long-term investment. And these are some of the recommendations that I think could help out Latinx students pursue a higher education. So I would say reform the FAFSA verification process. Like, just please get rid of it because it delays students' financial distribution, and if we get rid of it, it will help students receive their financial aid on time. The second recommendation is improve financial guidance, help students find scholarships they qualify for, and support students making informed financial decisions. And the third one is provide financial literacy programs. So teach students about student loans and interest payments, explain the difference between subsidized versus unsubsidized student loans, and help students understand long-term financial responsibilities. Even though this study mainly focused on Latinx students, I think a lot of students in college do experiences economic disadvantages and struggles paying off their college tuition. So I think this study could be very broad for every student. So I just want to say that, and just thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you. That was Amira Perez, and thank you very much. So I just want to say before we continue, we're going to take Q&A, so you can ask your questions. But I want to say thank you to Alma, Sierra, and Amina in particular, because they worked really hard to try to get this out, right? It's not easy to do this kind of work, and I assigned this kind of project precisely because it prepares you for graduate school, right? These are the kinds of things that are expected. And this presentation, thank you, Dean Napoli, and thank you, to Jennifer and those who worked on this, because the HSS Student Expo is so really important, precisely because it gives the opportunity for students to show off, right? To learn and show off, and to be affirmed. And so the whole idea that Sierra was talking about, leadership development, right? This is part of it. It allows for that opportunity for them to grow, right, and to sprout out. I know I would have appreciated it much more if I had that in college, because when I got to graduate school, I was so boring. When they asked me to present my work, my research, I'd be like going into the details. No one ever sort of sat me down and said, I'm first generation college student, by the way. So no one ever sat me down. I didn't know what I was doing. They didn't sit me down to say, hey, this is what you do. Get to like the meat of it, the heart of it, the interesting stuff. I wanted to explain everything that it took me to get there, but people are not interested in that, right? They can find out later in the Q&A. So this was a great opportunity, and they worked very independent. I just provided the guidelines. So I want to give a good shout out to these three individuals. And so let's take any questions you might have for Alma, Sierra, or Amira. Any questions you have? I know their topics are very different, and by the way, the other students are working very hard also on their research projects. And they range, again, from, because it's a Latinx Urban Institutions and Latinx Experience course, so it's, it has to connect somewhere, right?
right? And so some are doing about learning Mexican history and how that's important and why they should learn it in college and in high school. There's one on disabilities and services in urban schools, in public urban schools, and how parents need to navigate that whole system, right? So there's various different topics that the other students are working on, so I just wanted to, affirm that, and they're working on project areas as well. So any questions? Beth? Professor Evans. This is our Pearls Library liaison, by the way.
Great to be here with all of you. It's been quite a day. Yeah. So I appreciate your research. You're all exploring, and even the people who didn't speak, really important topics. I'm interested in sample size because I think you all were conscious of, that there were small samples. You were able to reach out to people you knew, I guess, Maria, in the class and the students, did you talk about how to, increase sample size because it's so critical?
Let me ask, come the three of presenters stand next to me. And so no, the students were limited by, I said, you can only interview 10 people, right? This is it, you can only interview 10 people. So when I spoke about how there are different places depending on what part of the process they're in, right? So, I showed only 6 because that's what she was able to get by the time this was due. And so, but I limited them to 10. I just want you to get the experience, just sort of, put it together, and get your feet wet. And hopefully, and I'm a sociologist by trade, so that's why I have them do this. But this is not a sociology class per se. It's a class connected to the School of Education and trying to give them sort of social studies content. But because Pearls we have our own student learning objectives, and part of it is creating a project and working on advocacy. So this project had either to do with either advocacy or leadership. And so that's what you saw there. And urban institutions, and Latinxs. So all of those have to converge into this. So no, I just limited them to 10. And it was sort of just give a taste. And so, I'm glad that they pointed out that yes, they had 10 or they had 6 responses. And I'm glad that they understood, right, that this is just 10 students, but it says something, especially I wanted them to connect what they found with their own research to the book research. And so you saw how they did that very differently as well, all 3 of them, but they were able to do that. So that was why they had that limited number. Do you want to make any comments on that? You're good? Okay, you're good. Thank you for that. Thank you. Anybody else? Any of the other students from the class have questions? This is not, I know it's not an easy feat, in terms of the challenge, because we're often, unfortunately, right, our education system, K through 12 and sometimes even college, sort of stumps us and doesn't have us doing interactive work, like working with the community, asking these kinds of questions, right? We try to develop more critical thinking skills in college, and so this is part of it. But, actually formulating it, how to formulate a research question, and how to get questionnaires together. What do you mean these are the only responses I can have them do? I limited them. I said, these are the limits, this is what you're going to do. So yeah, they had certain limitations that they couldn't sort of move beyond, and so I know some of them found it a little restrictive or difficult, but it's also about learning discipline, right? So I try to teach my students that, you can make it through college, you've learned basically how to follow instructions, what to do, and that's half the battle, right? Following instructions and sort of going with that. And at the same time, learning how to question and how to explore and how to think critically. So it's a whole mix of that, and it's a dance, right? Sort of a delicate dance that you try to do. Dr. Aha is the chairperson of Pearls, who I put in my next study, so welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
We didn't have their hands.
Wow, okay.
So do.
Introduce yourself, take your
Okay, hi, my name is Melissa. I'm a senior here at Brooklyn College. The 3 of you did really well. I just want to know, are you going to further your investigations, or did your projects, bring about other research questions that you will then delve into? What's going on?
Great question.
Well,
as somebody who's an English major and I do want to pursue a career in book writing or publishing, I do believe that with the research that I have so far, I can write something, a book, or dig deeper into my work because I did relate to my leadership development well as somebody who only got into Black studies and Puerto Rican studies until I got to Brooklyn College, which is good, but I do wish that there was more representation in high school and in middle school, so that is not.
I would say for me, because I am a child education major and in New York City, you do need masters, right, to become a professional teacher. I would say that I would like to see how graduate school, like I would like to see what scholarships they are for graduate school, especially towards like education teachers. So I could see myself doing research on that and like finding out, okay, how am I going to pay for this tuition in master's fees?
And Pearls does sometimes offer those workshops for students who are pursuing graduate studies and how to access that and how to enter doctoral studies from your bachelor's applying directly. So we do have professors that work with the students and sometimes we have workshops, so stay tuned.
I think this research project has really inspired me to further keep looking into it. I think that being a psychology major and wanting to have a career in occupational therapy and just mental health system as a whole needs a lot of work. And I think that I want to work with Latinx individuals, Black and brown communities. And I think that the more information that we can find out, the better it'll be for everyone, the more skills we will have. So I think it'll just benefit everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
I do hope y'all are considering graduate school. Excellent.
PCs.
Anita, I have a question, I guess, in general. FAFSA, I think you spoke to those seeing heads sort of like, oh my God, FAFSA. What do you think could happen if tuition? What would that do for the loveliness of bureaucracy? Everything that you detailed so well about the world of tax. How would that be a problem?
I honestly don't know because that's a big question. If college was free, I could never feel it's time for college, whatever, would be free. But I think if college is free, it'll give a lot of opportunities for students to go to college to get a higher education. I don't know how that would be regulated, right? Because we have to think about, okay, how are we going to pay our teachers? How are we going to fund these classes? Right? Because our tuition funds those things, right? So, and I don't really know how that is going to be organized and constructed, but it's an interesting concept to consider.
And Black CUNY was free before 1975, so it is possible. And that means we have to teach a little bit more about that, and we are going to get into some of that, but yes, so that's interesting. And there is, what is it? What is that? CUNY Student Rising, is it, right? That supports the, right? Right? That's it, right? Yes? CUNY Students, CUNY Rising Alliance.
There's a bill in the state senate also, the new deal allow there to. It would actually replace that.
It would replace that?
To some extent, it would remove, sort of move over the barriers. Go ahead, the students here.
Hi, I had a question regarding the development of your research questions. Did you guys have these topics that you came to the class with, or are they rooted in personal experience? And while you guys were doing your research questions changed? Because I'm a freshman at Brooklyn College. I'm doing a research project right now for my English class, and I came in with a research question, and it's completely different from the one that I'm actually writing about. So that's my question.
When I was thinking about my research question, I didn't want to come off as broad. So when I was thinking about a research question that was personal from my experience, I spoke to my professor and she did give me resources, and with the resources and things I was able to find a research question that was simplified, but I could still expand it more with my research without coming off as broad. So I think when developing a research question, it all depends on what information that you can gather as well as the topic in itself and it aligns with your study.
Within my case, I thought very fast and like, okay, I'm a student and I really do struggle with my tuition. So I had to narrow that down. Okay, I'm a Latinx student who struggles with tuition, and I really wanted to be relatable and passionate in my studies because I know if I'm not the only one experiencing this problem. So it helped a lot to have people right that I knew of accidentally participate in this study, and yeah.
I think when I was trying to figure out a research question, I started off and Dr. Perez Gonzalez told me that it could have been a dissertation for like graduate school. And it was just way too complex, and I wanted to do so much. I had this question. I would ask myself like, there's clearly a difference between people who grew up and were raised in rural places. And a big difference to people who grew up in cities. So that was always like the center of my question. And then I kind of just narrowed it down to how do Latinx individuals view authority and how that influences their interactions with authority. So it started out very, very broad and huge, and then I had to kind of reel it back in.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and remember that in terms of the course is focused on Latinxs and urban institutions. So they had great ideas, many of the students, and I was like, I'm sorry, but you gotta bring it down. You gotta use this population in urban, what urban institution are you addressing, right? So there's certain parameters they had to abide by. And then, yeah, some of them wanted to throw in all different kinds of, angles to it, and I was like, no, let's just keep it as simple as possible, otherwise it's gonna be too complex. You only have one semester, a few weeks, and it was already due, right? It's April, so it's not even at the end of the semester. And so, yeah, and I wanted them to be ready in time for the Expo. So that also shaped, right, what they were able to do. But some of them have fantastic ideas. It has to be done as a doctorate thesis. So I'm hoping they go ahead and pursue their doctoral studies.
Hi, so my name is Antonella. I'm also a freshman in English class at Max, so I'm also doing my own, writing my own research paper, and I think my topic was kind of similar to yours as well. So I was researching how the societal impacts of mainstream culture influence immigrant children and how they their alienation from their own cultural identities and stuff like that. So Sierra, you were kind of talking about how the lack of opportunities in school to learn about your culture and stuff sort of made students less connected with their identity and how that sort of impacts their academic performances and leadership performance. So I guess to sort of conduct my own research a little bit now, how would you say this sort of lack of exposure to their own your own culture, how does that influence your own cultural identity? And I guess anyone can answer it as well.
For me, could I say representation matters, especially in schools. As somebody who didn't know too much about Puerto Rican studies in college, and I learned much since my first year here, it mattered a lot. So when I was developing my research and my study, I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about, and especially with the political climate now where censorship is happening and they're trying to ban ethnic studies where students, Latinx students, Black and Brown students, they're not allowed to even know what their cultural necessity is. And again, their identity needs to be seen as an asset and not as an afterthought. So I do think it's vital that with more resources and mentorships that cultivate that same cultural background, it does give students a chance to not only see themselves in curriculums, but also desire and aspiration that, this curriculum, it shares with my cultural identity, so why would I not pursue a leadership role or any position that aligns with my identity?
You want to answer?
Oh.
Okay.
So my question is, for the survey portion of your guys' research, what did you guys think for each of your topics was most important after the participants, like their gender, their age, whatever?
That's a very great question. I think that questionnaire, the area of how people are and kind of any involvement with the justice system, I think that kind of set the foundation where I wanted to take the research, and it kind of helped me just put things into perspective. There are a lot of people that we are around every single day that has gone through something like this, or you don't know if a family member, and I think that, it was just very important information to start this.
In terms of me, I mainly focus on the focus questions because the open-ended questions where students can give their response. And I had a lot of open-ended questions that I wanted to answer by really narrow it down. So I think that was the important aspect because I really wanted to know what advice they give, right, to other students and also to me. Like I was looking for some advice. Like, how can I go about paying for my college tuition? I think that was the most important part for me in my research project.
And no lying, right? That's what you got.
No lying. For me, and I agree, the open-ended question for me was more important because I was able to hear everyone's perspective, not just what percentage to align with. I was able to see what others believe in what their school could have done in terms of leadership development, and some of the respondents, they gave their own take, like if they were a teacher and they were teaching, Latinx kids and how they wanted them to motivate them to become leaders. So those open-ended questions, I think that was more important for me because I was able to see how they felt and looking back on their school experience on what could have been better or what they would have changed or what the school should have did, because it does give a more accurate and I guess relevant point of view to the whole study.
And then a question.
Okay, you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I just want to say congratulations to you guys. The presentations was one. I wanted to ask a question to Amira. For your research when it comes to tuition, like uni tuition, I'm somebody that also has struggled, with tuition and, paying tuition, semester to semester. And I know with certain students, it's so easy for them to, like when they're in a financial hole, it's so easy for them to lean on taking out loans, but taking out loans is only going to put them in more debt, more tuition debt that they have to do. Did you, for your research, did you particularly go and visit the scholarship office where, that's also another guide? A lot of students here, unfortunately, do not know about the scholarship office. I have been able to use the scholarship office and it's helped me, pay tuition semester to semester. So have you been able to, was you able to go into the scholarship office and talk to like a Stephen Garcia or somebody there about your research about, students using the scholarship office for tuition?
So actually, I have not been to the scholarship office.
And how I got introduced to a scholarship that I did apply for and I did accept for was through my students, my peers. They said apply to this scholarship because they get a lot of money, especially for winter and summer courses. So I did not get the opportunity to visit the Office of Scholarships. And now that you mention it, I'll to, and I most definitely will for the upcoming semester. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, just to say, to the students right there, definitely look into the scholarship office. So the scholarship office could definitely help you when you guys are in a financial hole, so then you guys don't have to take out.
Yeah, and along those lines, Pearl's scholarship award applications are open. They're due next week. So go ahead and apply. It's we've sent it to all of our Pearl students. Some of them are specifically for Pearl's majors, minors, and concentrations, but some are not. So you can look at that and make sure you take advantage of that. And yes, in my classes, I try to tell the students about, let's say, the honors programs. We have a lot of good, honors programs here that students qualify for and they don't really know. So we'll be talking some more about that in class. And definitely, there's lots of scholarships. I remember I was on a scholarship 30 years ago, and even though they changed it, they made it more automated. But I remember that, there was one scholarship in particular, scholarship? Anyway, it was for the average student. It wasn't like you needed a high GPA, right? And that was fantastic because most students don't have a very high GPA, right? They're average students, like C students, and this scholarship was like, I think it was $1,000 for 10 students who were average students, but they had a story to tell, right? And so you're absolutely right. Go to the scholarship office, try to find out about that, be proactive. And, even to study abroad, the session that came before us, for study abroad opportunities, many of the students, they said, didn't wind up paying because they applied for scholarships that are available. So much of it was covered. So, I mean, that's a great way to travel and do your studies. So do take advantage. And once you craft a really good personal statement, you can use that and just tweak it and send it off somewhere else. So work with your professors or work with a tutor or work with, someone in the scholarship office to help craft those statements. They're available. And you can get money. One of the things I remembered as a student was that I was going to get as high grades as possible as I possibly could so they could pay me to go to college instead of me paying tuition to go to college. And that's how it worked out. And I was blessed through hard work and all of that I did. I was able to do my master's and doctorate in 5 under a scholarship, fully paid scholarship. So all I owed, because I took a 6th year instead of a 5, right? Life happens. But all I owed was like $600. And I got my doctorate. So, that was way back, and it wanted to increase, right? In sociology, but that was how I did it. So I was without that help, without somebody having that foresight and saying, hey, it was sponsored through the National Institute of Mental Health, the federal government at that time. This time it won't work that way, but not in this day and age. But then I owe, right, my doctorate, my studies to those faculty who had vision at Fordham University through the Hispanic Research Center there and said, we need more sociologists who are Latinx, who are Hispanic. And so that's how I did it. But it wasn't necessarily I was so special. I just, continued to be diligent on my study. I wasn't always the smartest person in the room. I'm not. But I applied myself, right? And you develop skills and you learn from others that know how to do this stuff. And that's how I got in. So that's laughing, but it's true, right? I wasn't always, but I was consistent and diligent and kept my grades up and applied myself. Once the school was over, or the semester, I forgot everything I learned for the most part. but that's another factor in our education system that is really like the more you do hands-on work, that's why I sort of tend to like to do hands-on creative work, and that helps us retain, right, what we learn. It's a little bit more exciting and interesting. So anyway, that's enough of my advisement session. I think we have maybe one more question. That's it. What's it?
I noticed that each of your topics influence one another. They could all correlate very well with each other. Do you guys see a way that you guys could use each other's research to further your research in a way?
For me, I could say with the financial, it does because I noticed within my research, because of the lack of curriculum that is identity-based, is because most are underfunded. So they can only provide so much curriculum for students. So I do think with financial, that will be necessary for my study. And for your study, I will say that with policing and with Latinx youth, that would align with leadership development, especially those who are not seen and want to be pursued. So I do think all three would align with each other.
In terms of me, how I see this project aligning with that, I know that if someone, for example, someone does have a record that does opportunities for them, like job opportunities, so I would like to research on how having a criminal record or an altercation with the police does affect if you're able to get scholarships, grant money, and then for profession, I think how I would like to see how come financial classes are not provided in schools for certain activities. Luckily, in high school, I was able to take a financial course, but that course was established for previous seniors, right? So I was the only senior in my class that took financial literacy. So that's a really interesting topic. I like to research it.
It's a really great question, and I think that we can definitely use all of our research to kind of put together and make one big thing. I think that the education is one of the other urban institutions that I mentioned that kind of ties in together with what I was talking about, because I think these perceptions that many Latinx individuals have follow them to school and kind of get in the way of maybe feeling confident enough to apply for financial aid, or feeling like, oh, maybe I don't, my parents don't make enough, because I come from XYZ, I'm undocumented, so I'm afraid to go to school. I think all of these kind of work together and impact one.
Absolutely, thank you. So I want to give a special shout out and thank you to Sierra Smith Vasquez, Amira Perez, and Alma Cabrera. Thank you so much for coming on out and supporting us. I am so proud of these three students and the rest of my students here. They're going to be working hard on their projects, and so thank you so much. Dina, do you have
I would just like to say one small thing. This is the conclusion of the 6th annual HSS Expo. For those of you guys who did not get to present this year, you'll be back. Right? Professor Bammert's going to bring you back one way or another, right?
Yeah.
I also wanted to make special shout out to the office of the dean's office staff, which is to say, Jennifer, the dean. And I'm deeply grateful to Sabrina Lobo, who's upstairs on the 4th floor, to the staff that's behind the glass, without whom we would not be able to do this, Hannah Benjamin, and whatever Hannah's point is, he has made so much of the last 2 days possible. So thank you all for coming. We'll see you next year.